Howdy folks, it's me, Josh. So for today's video, I held a contest in my Discord server to see who could create the most interesting alternate history scenario, with the best one being made into a video. There were plenty of great things submitted, but in the end, I decided to go with a scenario written by my friend Bristol on if parts of the South stayed loyal to the Union during the Civil War. So without further ado, let's get into it. The year is 1860, and for centuries, the industrial North and agricultural South in America had been growing apart as the divisions between them manifested in numerous different issues. And at this point, the main issue for debate between the North and South would be slavery. But after the election of Abraham Lincoln, most Southern states would end up seceding from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America, starting the American Civil War. But although the topic is often oversimplified, there's actually a lot more complexity to Southern secession. Many parts of the South had very large non-slaveholding and anti-secessionist white populations, particularly in northern Georgia and Alabama, eastern Tennessee, and western Arkansas. And these states were extremely divided on the issue of secession, not just among the populace, but also among the politicians at each of their secession conventions. In the end, though, these states would end up seceding and joining the Confederacy, as many of these populations would end up fighting for the South, not to defend slavery, but to defend their home. And after the end of the war, and the defeat of the Confederacy, the South would be put under the harsh policy of Reconstruction, which would leave them embittered against the North for generations to come. But what if that changed? What if, in an alternate timeline, the divisions in these states caused them to split upon the outbreak of the Civil War? In this timeline, the anti-secessionist populations would end up breaking off from their states and forming pro-Union governments, sort of like what happened with Virginia in our timeline, until West Virginia decided it wanted to be its own state. With much less support for the Confederacy in the Deep South, this would bring states in the Upper South to start questioning secession. North Carolina, which already saw a great amount of support for secession, would still secede from the Union, but the same can't be said for Virginia, as Virginia likely ends up staying loyal to the Union. So, as a result, the Confederacy would see much less support, not only in the Upper South, but also in the Deep South. And with these areas staying loyal to the Union, this would mean that many major generals, such as Robert E. Lee, James Longstreet, and Stonewall Jackson, would all stay loyal to the Union, meaning the South would not only lose a lot of manpower, but also many of their most capable military leaders. Even beyond this, the South would also end up being in an extreme geographic disadvantage as well, with the Carolinas, the largest bastions of secessionism in the South, being nearly completely split off from the rest of the Confederacy. So, all this being said, the South would be defeated much quicker than in our timeline, as the war doesn't see nearly the same level of destruction that we saw. As a result of this, it's very likely that Reconstruction would be brought about in a much more moderate manner, such as how Abraham Lincoln planned to bring it about, being much more lenient on the South. And with the war ending up much smaller than in our timeline, and without the South seeing nearly as much devastation, it's also very likely that Lincoln isn't assassinated, which would keep the radical Republicans from having more reason to pursue anti-Southern policies. Meanwhile, without the extreme levels of animosity between the North and South that we saw in our timeline, it's very likely that the Democratic Party would remain competitive in several northern states. And with other, better generals fighting for the Union, it's unlikely that Ulysses S. Grant would end up becoming president, as someone like Robert E. Lee might end up taking his place. Under such a hypothetical presidency, it's very likely that Lee would place a heavy emphasis on mending the divides between the North and South, as the country becomes much more unified overall. In the end though, the North, with their industrialized economy, would still end up dominating the nation as a whole, as the country generally continues along the same path that it had in our timeline. But, as the nation avoids the devastation that it saw during the Civil War, it ends up coming out a much more stable and unified society. I want to give another big thanks to Bristol for writing the scenario, and to everyone who submitted for this contest. And if you want to participate in the next one, make sure to join my Discord server through the link in the description for the chance to have your scenarios appear on my channel. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to stick around for more. And hey, you could also maybe subscribe or something. So that's it for today's video. Well, till next time, see ya.